Hey guys, welcome back. This time around we're going to do speed square. This is one of my favorite tools in my bags. You can't be a carpenter if you can't swing a hammer, read a tape measure, read a level. You also can't be a carpenter if you can't use a speed square. It's probably one of the most versatile tools that are going to be in your bags. You're going to always want to have one. It does a whole lot more than what you probably think it does. And some of you know a lot of the things that it does, but there's still more, believe me. This is going to be a two-part video. So for this one, it's going to be the very basics of it. We're going to cover how to check and see if a board is cut square using your speed square. We're going to go over how to make a square line on a board for a cut using your speed square, how to do a 45-degree angle, how to use it as a fence so that you can get a nice perfect square cut using a skill saw. And we'll even dip in a little bit into how to start doing angles and different pitches for roofs. Okay, first thing that we're going to go over with the speed square is real simple, just how to do a 90-degree line and a 45-degree line. If you look at your speed square, it's got a perfect 90 for you and it's got a perfect 45. So the way you make that work is actually just make sure that you're holding the speed square tight against the wood. If you're off this way or off this way, it's not going to give you your 90 or your 45. So just make sure you're nice and tight to there. Draw your line. There you got a nice 90. If we want to do a 45, we do the exact same thing, hold it nice and tight, and just use this side here. And that'll give you a 45 every time. So here we're going to use the speed square to check and see how flush the cut is on the end of the board. Sometimes factory cuts are really nice and flush, sometimes they're not. That's why most 2x material actually comes about a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch long so that you can cut it flush if you need to. So if we put this nice and tight against here, slide it forward to the end, so it's just butted up there. You can see this is a really nice cut. It stays even all the way across that, so we don't have to mess with that. We've got a nice 90. If we look at this board on the other hand, we get it tight, slide it up, and you can see it's nice and tight and flush right here, but it gets further and further away from where it needs to be the further you get down. So we're definitely going to have to fix that. So what I'm going to do is, like in the last section, pull it tight, mark our 90, and then we'll cut that off and have a nice square end. Then I'll kind of move the square over to it so you can see how it sits on the line now. Okay, so next we want to go over angles a little bit. So just to start things off, we're going to come up with a number and just say 6 inches in is where we want to start our angle from. So if you look at your speed square, it has a point on the corner there where it says pivot. So for your pivot point, you just hold everything tight and you can pivot like this off that pivot point. And what you're looking at for your different angles is going to be, here's your degrees. So if I wanted to do a 15-degree angle, what I do is I pivot on my pivot point until this 15 is in line with the edge of the board. There you can see the 15 is in line with the edge of the board. So I hold everything tight, and now this line is a 15-degree angle off of this board. If we flip it over, we'll just start our pivot point right there. We can also go off of roof pitches. So roof pitches are angles, but they don't use degrees. They use rise over run. How many inches of rise is there in a foot of run? So that's what this one right here is. It says common. It's hard to read on mine, but That's for doing common rafters. So on this, let's say we were gonna do a 4-pitch roof. It's a pretty common one. So we'll pivot on that same point and we'll slide it out until this number 4 falls in line with the board, just like we did the degrees earlier. There we got a 4. So now same thing, we just mark that side. Now we've got a 4-pitch roof cut. That'll be the plumb cut for doing a roof. All right, in the last segment, we went over some of the common rafter pitches. One thing I want to point out real quick, we're not going to get into it until we do a roof framing class or a second speed square, but there's also this hip valley rafter angle. You can avoid this scale for now. You only use that on rare occasions where you're doing a raised pitch at the same time as you're doing a 45-degree angle, which is what you get on a hip or a valley rafter. So we want to focus on the common rafter and the degrees for our angles. So beyond angles, if you look at this thing, it's also a short ruler. It's got everything in 1/8 of an inch. So if you need to scribe a line down 1 inch away from the board, you can actually take your carpenter's pencil, stick it in this little notch, that's exactly what it's for, and just slide down. Same thing if I wanted to do 2.5 inches. I find my 2.5 on my ruler. I just come across to the nearest notch, right at 2.5, and I can slide back and I can scribe a line at 2.5 inches. So next time we get into speed square, we're gonna do a part 2 to this. We're gonna go over quite a few other things that there are in this thing. We haven't even begun to scratch the surface on it, but if you guys can master that, then you've got a pretty decent start on this thing. All right guys, so that was the first portion of intro to speed square. We're gonna do another one. In the process of the second one, we are gonna go into some roof framing, so be prepared for that. That's a really fun use of the speed square. I really enjoy roof framing. It makes you think and think and think. So we will start using more of the common rafter scale and some of the hip and valley rafter scale in the next one. But for this one, I think we did a pretty good job of going over how to use this for some real basic stuff. Checking to see if your boards are square, making sure you can make square marks, 45 marks. Use this thing as a fence for your saw. As you can see, there's quite a bit you can actually do with this thing. So you're gonna have one in your bags at all times on every single job site.